You are welcome to Codby Business Solutions PLC, Free Skill Acquisition and Entrepreneurship Development. My name is Aziz Eniton Edunwale. I'll be your host on photography class. The class will be in 3 modules. The first module will be introducing us to what photography is all about and the equipment we use in photography, while the second module will be talking about lens and all the other peripherals that we use in photography. The third module is the most important one, where we'll be dealing with the exposure triangle, which is the art of photography. So without wasting much time, I will invite you to the class. Let's go. Then we'll talk about different parts of photography. So let's start the class proper. So the question, what is photography? Photography is simply capturing light on a light sensitive device to create a visual image. What do I mean by this? If you take your phone and you want to snap someone or anything, you agree with me, if the light in that space is not enough, your picture will be dark. And if the light is too much, your picture will be wide. So what you're actually capturing, you're actually capturing light. So it's the light that is creating the image on the sensor of your phone or any device you're using to capture the image. So that's what photography is all about. It's just about capturing light on a sensitive device. With the other definition that we'll see, but no definition will go beyond telling you that it's all about capturing light. And what we use to capture, what we use to capture image in photography are our digital camera. Even your phone is a miniature digital camera also. If we go to the next slide, we say we have 2 types of camera. We have the amateur camera and the enthusiast and professional camera. So what do you mean by amateur camera? Your phone camera, even though it's iPhone, that everybody is crazy about, like that's a very good camera, it is still considered amateur camera. And we have what we call point and shoot cameras. If you look at the slide, you are look at the camera that is on the slide, the Sony camera. That's a example of point and shoot. I will explain what point and shoot camera is as we go on. We have phone camera, we all know what phone camera is, and we have point and shoot camera. Again, once you just point if you have point and shoot camera, all you just have to do is just for you to point the camera at whatsoever thing you want to capture, and you press your button and you capture. Another one that we have here is what we call micro four third. This is a bit advanced than your phone camera and your point and shoot camera, in the sense that you can change the lens. In your phone camera, you cannot change the lens of your phone camera, although they are coming out with technology where you can attach lens at the back of your phone and for you to capture. Your point and shoot, as you have seen here, the lens is attached to the camera. You can't do anything to it. You are locked up with the lens. But if you come to this micro four third camera, you can do what? You can change the lens. Some of this type of camera also give you the privilege of attaching flash on it. That is why it is a bit advanced compared to your phone and your point and shoot camera. Another one that we are looking at here, what we call bridge and super zoom camera. It is called bridge because it is the camera that bridges the gap between a professional camera and your amateur camera, in the sense that you can zoom, you have the ability to zoom very far, but you cannot change the lens. If you have this camera, you can any other thing that other cameras are doing, this camera can do it just with little limitation that you are locked up with the lens that you have, and you can zoom in and zoom out. That's what we call the bridge and super zoom camera. Look at the image there. You can see that the lens has been zoomed out. So that is what super zoom, bridge and super zoom camera is. That is how it looks on the slide. The other one that we have is what we call the professional camera or the enthusiast camera. These are the camera you will see anytime you go out. When you're at a wedding party, or the professional are using to capture. These are the camera we are seeing here. The first we'll talk about what we call mirrorless and CSA camera. Now, everybody is going to what we call mirrorless camera. We will explain what mirrorless camera is. If you have mirrorless, then we have mirrorful as we go on. Mirrorless camera or CSA. CSA means compact system camera. It's a small camera, but very powerful camera. The features are it's small, lightweight, and use interchangeable lens. As a viewfinder, used to evaluate the scene. What do I mean by viewfinder? If you are looking at the photographer that want to snap you, he will put the camera, he will put his eyes at the back of the camera to look at whatever things that you want to snap. That small part of that camera is what we call the viewfinder, and it employs electrical viewfinder. So that is the feature of mirrorless camera or CSA camera. Now, the other one that we have is what we call digital single lens reflex camera. The camera you see every day with all photographers, either at a wedding party or burial or any event, or even if you go for your normal photo shoot. This is the type of camera that the photographers are using to do that daily shooting. But like I said, mirrorless camera, it is what is coming. That will be the norm of the day now. That's what everybody is going for now. But the difference between this camera and that mirrorless camera is that this digital single lens reflex camera is heavier than the mirrorless camera. And what is the difference? Because if the other one is mirrorless, then this one has what we call, then this one will be what we call mirrorful. But they just call it what? The digital single lens reflex camera. Now, the camera has single lens, mirror and prism arrangement. Let me see if I look at this is the image here now. Now, it has single lens. That means you can only use one lens. Most cameras use one lens at a time. You can change them. Then it has you see the same thing as the camera sensor is seeing. That means if you look at the back of the camera to snap, what you are seeing as individual, as a photographer, that is what the camera sensor is also seeing. Unlike this other one, this mirrorless camera, what you are seeing as a photographer is not the same thing as the camera is seeing. This one, although with the help of the electric viewfinder, is trying to make sure what you are seeing is what the camera is seeing. If you go to the next item here, as this one is trying to just evaluate the scene for you to give you like a replica of what the camera is seeing, but not exactly what the camera is seeing. But when you come here, you are seeing what the camera is seeing. But this CLSR camera come in two major types. We have the full frame sensor and we have the crop sensor. As the name implies, it's a full frame sensor. If you're as old as I am or older than me, you understand. If you'll be familiar with what they call film camera. When you are very small, when I was very small, if they want to snap you, the guy will bring one strap like this that has one plastic, put it at the camera. That's what they call the film camera. That is it. So we are talking about full frame. That means it has the same film sensor size as the old camera. These are the professional camera and they are quite expensive. So the other one that we have is what we call crop sensor. This is a smaller sensor version of this ALSR camera, which is bigger than the other cameras. So, which is a smaller version of the full frame camera. And because the full frame, they are quite expensive. You can see for full frame, the new one will go for in Nigeria, let's say 800,000, minimum 500,000. But you as a newcomer photographer, if you don't have money, you can also buy crop sensor 150, 200. You can even sell up to 500. But that's just it is cheaper. We will go for this. Is how it look. The example I'm showing here is Nikon camera. We also have Canon. We have different brand. The one that look like Monster that is on its own at the left is the full frame. Yeah, but the one on the right that looks smaller is the crop sensor. So those are how they look. Now, the next part we'll be going is what they call part of the camera. If you are using a tool to work, you must know different parts of the tool so they can make most of it. What we are saying is the camera body. I think we all know what camera body is. That's a sample of it. The next part we call digital sensor. Look at that in the glass. That is what we use to capture image. Once you press that button, this is what we call the image you are capturing. And we have the lens. This is the eyes of the camera. That's what the camera sees through. And you as a photographer, what you see through also. Now we now have the shutter. What do you mean by shutter? If you take any picture, you always hear sound. That is the shutter. It's shut and opens. It's shut and open. That's what you used to record. When the shutter you make that sound, it has closed and open. Work with the lens aperture to control the amount of light that is the sensor. We will still talk more about this thing. So shutter is inside the camera. You cannot see it with your eyes, except you remove the lens. But for your phone and everyone, you can't even see it. It's inside. So the shutter is like a curtain. That's how it looks. Can you see? It was small at the first one. Then the second part is becoming bigger, bigger, bigger. That's how. So the next thing we'll talk about is memory card. I don't know what memory card is. Memory card used by digital camera. We call this SD card. Sundays we have different capacity. We have 512, 124. They are different, but these are the common one that is used. So we call them SD card. And we have features of the camera. Feature, you are done with the part of the camera, but we're talking about the features of the camera. Those are the features what you will see on the camera. The first one we have is called megapixel. We all know what megapixel with the use of smartphone. If you are buying phone, they will say the camera is 42 megapixel. Now, mega means 1 million. So if you are buying a phone that has 42 megapixel, that means it has 42 million pixel. In digital photography, image are captured in pixel. Small squares that form the image. The bigger the pixel, the bigger the pixel, the more the sharpness of the camera. But we shouldn't be fooled by the pixel of a camera because it can't work on its own. It needs to work with the sensor size of the camera. That is why you will see a professional camera is full frame camera with 12 megapixel, and you will see 12 sensor camera with 50 megapixel, and that full frame camera that is with 12, the picture quality will be better than that of the smaller camera that has 20 pixel because of the sensor size. So the next feature of a camera is called sensor size. That means is how big the sensor of the camera is. The bigger the sensor, the better the production of that camera. Because there is nothing you having the ability to capture a lot of light, not having the platform to store the light. The megapixel is telling you the ability the camera has to capture light, while the sensor is the platform on which you will store the light. If your platform can only store 10,000 light and you capture 1 million light, what the sensor will store is just 10,000. The other one are waste. That is why pixel is not enough. You need the sensor size also. The other features of camera is called frame per second. Frame per second. What do you mean by frame? Frame is the image you capture. If you capture one image like this, that is one frame. That means frame per second. That means how many image that camera can capture per second. Some camera can capture 8, some can capture 10. Your smartphone camera, they have advertised it before, they can capture 40 frames per second. That is number of image that can be captured in 1 second. That is the frame per, what frame per second mean. The next thing we have here is ISO. ISO, International Standard Organization. This is, we're not talking about ISO here, but ISO as it relates to photography is talking about the sensitivity of our camera sensor to light. How sensitive is our camera sensor to light? The camera gives you the ability to control this sensitivity. If you want it to be highly sensitive, If you want to be low sensitive, you adjust it on the camera. We are coming to this later in the future module. That means, but module 2, we will come to it. The next thing we will have what we call light meter. What your camera is working with is light meter. As the name implies, you use this to measure the quantity of the available light. If the light you have is enough, or if the light you have is not enough, that is what the light meter does. The last item you are using MASP. These are acronyms. M stands for manual. When you are shooting your camera, the camera producer give you the option to use any mode to shoot. You can choose a manual mode. A stands for aperture priority mode, shutter speed mode, or program mode. We will still come to this in the future module. We are just taking you through the features of the camera. Now let's talk about the high-end camera. No, we have talked about the high-end camera. We have the small format camera. Remember when I was talking earlier, I said that we have amateur and enthusiast and professional camera. And we said those camera at the enthusiast and professional camera is divided into two, where we have the full frame and the crop sensor. We're not taking it a step further now. We are going to the high-end camera, the camera used by the professional. So we can say we have 3 types, but what you will see majorly is a 2 type. I have never seen the third one, which is the large format. The first one we'll talk about there, we call the small format camera, which is full frame DCLSR camera, like I explained earlier, the one used by the professional. And we have the range finder camera also. Those are under the small format camera. And this is the camera you will see every day in the hand of almost every photographer, because that is the one that they can easily afford. We have the medium format camera. That is the example we are looking at, the penthouse we are seeing on the screen. This is the medium format camera. The sensor size is bigger than the small format camera. And these are used majorly by the advertising agency, those that are doing pictures for bigger billboard or for high-end commercial job. This is the camera that is used. This camera one costs almost 20 million if you want to get, if you convert it to Nigeria currency. So now another thing that we'll talk about, we have lens. Lens is one thing that without lens we cannot capture any image in photography. Whereas a lens is the eyes of the camera. And we all know if you pick up a lens of a camera, even at the back of your phone, you will see glass there. Lens is made up of series of glasses. So these glasses are the elements of the lens. These are what lens is all about. So lens is constructed to refract and focus light on the camera sensor. That means that is what used to direct light to the camera sensor, to direct what you are capture to the camera sensor. Without lens, you cannot capture any image in photograph. Let's look at the features of lens. When we look at a lens, if you look at lens, if you look at any camera lens, it has some features. Something must be on it. Because like I said, we are talking about the camera body. We are not talking about another component of photography, which is the lens. We have focus. I would use your camera phone as an example. If you want to snap some with your camera phone, you will see one squirting on your phone. That is what used to focus on what you want to capture, but most of us don't know. We just point and shoot, except we use eye detection. That will help us direct it to the eyes. That is the focus. That is the ability of the lens to resolve light. Say, this is the point I want the light to be directed at, and that's where I want most bright of the camera. It gives the lens ability to point light on the sensor at different distance. So focus. If you do not focus your image, the image you will get will be blurry. So focus is very key. One of the key features of lens. Another thing that we have, other features of lens is focal length. Focal length. You will say, I want to snap something that is that far. Let me zoom in. Or you want to zoom out. What gives you the ability to do that is still the focal length. And the focal length is measured in millimeter. It's measured in mm. If you look at any lens, you will see it on the lens. Let me see if I have one I can use. Oh, it's not too clear yet. I will use that as an example. So it's measured in millimeter. You will have lens of 35 mm. You have lens of 70 mm, 150 mm, 5000 mm. You have 70 to 120 mm. Those are the focal length that describe the length, how far the lens can capture. Either you can capture something that is very, very far or something that is very, very close. The bigger the number, the further the lens can go to capture anything. Lens with a longer focal length is called telephoto lens. Wide one with shorter focal length is called wide range lens. So the lens used majorly to capture wildlife, they are telephoto lens. If you are a football fan, you watch football very well. On the pitch, you will see some photographer at the edge of the football pitch trying to capture images. You will see one big lens like this, that is a bit big like cup. That lens is a sample of telephoto lens. So that even though they are at the other post and Ronaldo want to score at the other end, they will use that lens to zoom because it can see very long. And you see as if it's capturing Ronaldo right in his own front. Another features of lens that we need to know is what we call aperture. Aperture. Explain the opening of the lens diaphragm that lets light in. Let's leave that technical jargon. Aperture is telling you in the lens has holes. That tells you how wide that hole can open and close. So this is very, very key in photography. And this feature alone can differentiate lens, different lens. You can see a lens that is 35 mm. One will cost 50,000. The same lens, 35 mm, the other will cost 500,000. What is the difference? It is the aperture, the ability of the lens to open. The wider the lens can open, the more expensive that lens is. So, and this aperture is measured in f-stops. It is there, f-stop. We will come to it when we go to our in module 2 and module 3 as we go further. Now, another one that we have is called angle of view. This describes the view of coverage of the lens. How wide can the lens cover? Can it cover very wide or it can cover narrow? We'll also talk about it when we go further. So one important thing that we also need to know about lens feature, what we call image stabilization or vibration reduction. If you have carried DSLR camera before, especially the professional one, you will agree with me that camera is very, very heavy. So when you want to capture an image, there is tendency that your hand will shake. So they have built a mechanism inside that even when your hand shakes, your picture will not look blurry. Because every time will balance for the shake of your hand. Not that you just be checking. That is what we call by image stabilization and vibration reduction. We now have type of lens. We have normal lens. What normal lens means that I say, I will just use so that we can understand. The lens that can see what your normal eyes can see. We have telephoto lens that can see very long. We have wide angle lens that can see wide, like you are a wedding photographer. You are a wedding photographer. You want to capture the family, and they will keep from here to the other. What can help to capture that is your what? Is a wide angle lens. In cameras of today, camera will have three at the back. There will be 3 lenses. Some Android will have 4. Those lenses have different function. Some is if you want to capture your friend that is close with only one lens will work. If you want to capture many people as plenty as they are, another lens will work. That's why they do different type of lens to capture different. We have micro lens. These are the lenses that used to capture you want to capture ants, sugar ants, and to look as if it's big. Use your macro lens. We have zoom lens. You can zoom this one out and in. We have prime lens. This lens you cannot adjust it. What it gives you is what you take. And we have fish eye lens. We talk about wide angle lens. You know, fish eye is at the side. You can see almost 190 degrees. It's looking straight. You can see what is happening at the right hand, left hand without turning the eye. The same thing with the lens. We have tilt shift lens and reflex lens. These are specialized lens for a particular purpose. We now have lens accessories. Lens accessories. These are just things that you can use on your lens. We have filter in your digital phone, I mean your smartphone. If you want to snap someone, when you snap, you apply filter and the person will look either yellowish, greenish, smoother, and everything. So our lens also have filter. You can use filter in front of your lens to change the color or the mood of your photography, or to even reduce the light, or to make the light brighter. That's what we use filter. We now have extension rings, tube, and bowls. These are accessories. If you cannot purchase telephoto lens because they are quite expensive, you just have normal lens. You can buy what they call extension rings. You insert it on your camera, they put the lens on it, it will turn into a telephoto lens. You can also help you turn a telephoto lens to a wide angle lens. You can help you turn a normal lens to a micro lens. That is what this extension ring, tube, and belows are doing. Lens in its soul, in as much as they are good, they have their flaws and faults. That means you buy lens, you won't get the quality of what you are. This is what you will come. Well, one, spherical aberration, chromatic aberration, barrel and portion distortion, and flare and vignetting. What do you mean by aberration? You snap a picture and you are looking at the edge, you are seeing some green color. Who put the green color that you don't know? Those are from the flaws of the lens. We now have barrier and pinch hole. When you are trying to snap someone, the person looks so like it's like the person is coming out of the image. The person is popping out. That is a lens flaw. We now have flare and vignetting. What is flare? The edge of the image is becoming whitish, or vignetting is what is becoming dark. That means that lens is not good again. You need to change. I say thank you. That is the end of the first module. So let's prepare for the second module. Okay, we are welcome back. This is the module 2 of our photography class. Yeah, we are going to take it a bit slow so we can understand, because what we are going to discuss here is what photography is all about. So please, I will ask you and plead with you that you should be attentive so that we can get the import of this second module. So I will also advise you, after this class, you can go online and try to do your research, like for better understanding. So what we are talking about here, we are talking about exposure triangle. In the previous module, we just do an introduction to what photography is all about. I said photography is just all about capturing light on a sensitive device. And we talk about the tools that we use to capture photography, which is our camera. And briefly, I said we have two types of camera. We have the amateur camera and the what? The enthusiast and the professional camera. And we look at the amateur camera. We say your smartphone camera fall to the class of amateur camera, point and shoot camera, micro for third camera, and we also talk about what bridge and super zoom camera. That's where our amateur camera. When we talk about the enthusiast and professional camera, we are talking about our DCLSR and rangefinder camera. And we also mentioned about the professional camera, where we will talk about the what? The small format camera and the medium format camera. The third one, which is large format camera, which is not commonly in use. I've not seen it before. I've only seen it on the internet before. I will talk about other part of camera, we have camera body and the lenses. Now we're talking about exposure triangle. If you look at the screen, you are seeing one triangle there, although it's not too clear. That is what we use to capture even your camera, your phone camera. Employ this triangle to do its image capturing. Now, what is exposure triangle? I will read from the slide and I will explain. It is the amount of light that hits or gets to the camera sensor or photographic film. It determines how bright or dark our pictures are. What am I trying to say? Your exposure here, exposure in photography is talking about the image you capture. If you use your phone to capture, to snap your friend in a dark room, you will say, it's not too dark. Open the window. iPhone, that means that your exposure is a dark exposure. If you now open the window and you snap, say, this is a perfect. To you, that's your perfect exposure. Or you can also open the window and what you are getting is too bright. That's what they call, we're talking about, that's too bright exposure. And what we are talking about here, we're talking about exposure, we're talking about the light you are capturing. Remember, I said photography is all about capturing light. So what you capture is determines is either too bright or too dark or normal for you. We're talking about the amount of light that we capture with our camera, whichever camera we use, is measured in what? Stops. S-T-O-P-S. Stops. It can be called exposure value. It's measured in stops, or you call it what? It can be called exposure value. Well, what you'll be hearing more often is what? Stops. Stops. Increasing or decreasing the exposure from stop to the next is doubling or halving the light that strikes the camera. What am I trying to say here? If I want to snap you or snap an object, and I snap the object and the object look too dark, what am I supposed to do as a photographer? I have to let in more light to come into that place I'm snapping or into the camera. So when I let the camera to come in, that means I have increased the light of my camera sensor that should hit the sensor. And when I'm doing this, for me to, let's assume I have the quantity of light I have is just two light, and I want to add another light to it. I cannot add light from 2 to 3. I have to double it to what? To 4. That's what's called doubling or halving. If I want to increase downward, I have to increase half of 2, which should be what? 1. That's called doubling or halving the light. Although our camera has given us capability to do fraction of what? Stop. So what I was saying that it is determined by the interplay of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. That means the light that hits our camera sensor is determined by 3 things: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. By now, aperture, you have heard it before in the previous class. You have heard of shutter, we're adding speed to it, and ISO also. We're talking about. These are the 3 things that we call exposure triangle. So these are the 3 items or elements that determine how bright or how dark our image is. So let's go to aperture value. Aperture value. If you have camera before you or in front of you, it will be very good for you to follow along. Aperture, like I explained, that one of the features of lens is aperture, which determine the hole, which how wide or tiny the hole inside your lens is. Aperture is the size of the hole opening in the lens diaphragm that allows light into the camera. Aperture value is measured in what? F stops. That means it's measured in fraction, F divided by stop. That is what aperture value is. We don't need the mathematics. We don't need the mathematics. But let's go. So it's measured in F stop. That's in like F/16. But usually written as a whole number like 8 or 11. What are we saying here? If they are going to write aperture for you on your lens or anything, what you will see is 16, 8, 11, 32, 64, 5.6, 4.5, 2.8, 1.8. That's how it's going to be written. But you as a photographer, you should know that that thing is in fraction. If you see 16, it means what? F all over 16, that's 1 all over 16. It is not 16 as whole number. The F in the F stop represent the focal length of the lens, normally expressed in millimeter. We shouldn't go to the mathematics calculation of this, but we don't need it for this class. AV determines the amount of depth of field in an image. What I mean? Aperture value will tell you the amount of depth of field in an image. If you look at a professional photograph where the cameraman snap an image or an individual, the individual will be sharp, but everything at the background will be blurry. That's what I call it. That's what we mean by what? Depth of field, or the amount of element that will be in that image. That's what depth of field. If you want a shallow depth of field, that means one small thing, only small item to what? to be seen. And if you want a very deep depth of field, then what are you going to do? You want everything to be bright in that field. The wider the aperture opening, the shallower the depth of field, and vice versa. What do you mean by aperture opening? The hole in your lens, if you open it so wide, what you will be seeing, what is close to you will be what? Sharp. But what is further to you will be what? Blurry. That will be called what? Shallow depth of field. But if you want everything from your foreground to be background to be sharp, we are going to have what we call a deep depth of field. Then we have to do your opening to be very, very small. So these are the aperture value. If you can see on the screen, we have f divided by 1.1. You can see from the diagram that the O there, like look like is it hexagon? Yeah, 6. That's hexagon. Can you see it's big, it opens wide. If you come to the left, what we call sweet spot, you can see that that diagram there is almost wide. That shows you that if you use F1, then the light that will come into that camera will be so bright and your image will be so bright. From there, you move to F1.4, which is another full stop. Then we come up to F8, where you are seeing that it's becoming dark. The bigger the number, the smaller the opening of the aperture. That is just what you should know. If you want your lens to open very wide, you use small number. If you want to open very small, you use what? Bigger number. When we go for that, we'll see how to put this thing into, how to put it to use in our camera. And this diagram is also here trying to tell us more about aperture. From the left hand side, where you see f divided by 2.8, if you look at the opening there, you can see it's very wide. When it goes down to f divided by 22, you can see that the opening is very, very small. And this diagram is trying to depict what the camera will see. If you look at when it was f.2, look at the image and the tree. The image is so sharp. What happened to the tree? The tree is fading away. That's what we mean by what? A shallow depth of field. If you come to the middle, the image is so sharp, the tree is becoming sharper, but it is not as sharp as the image. But if we now come to our right hand side, that's f22, the image is so sharp and the image is so, the tree is also sharp. That's what we mean by what? A deep depth of field. Why the one on our left is what we call shallow depth of field. That's just to explain what we mean by that. The next thing we want to talk about is shutter speed. Shutter speed. If lens help you determine the amount of light that enter the open aperture, tell you the opening of the lens to allow light to enter. Shutter speed is what is between the lens and the camera sensor. The shutter is between the lens and the camera sensor. If the lens allow light to enter, if the shutter does not open, the sensor will not receive any light. Now, the opening and the closing of that shutter is the speed of the opening and closing of that shutter is what we call shutter speed. And this is measured in fraction of a second. In fraction of if you use your phone to start, it has opened and it has closed. Are you following? That is what shutter speed now. Now, if you open your lens aperture so wide, more light will come in. And your shutter open at a very slow rate. Too much light will hit the sensor. And if you open at a very fast rate, a little light will hit the sensor. So that means your aperture and your shutter. So if your shutter open too fast, that means little light will hit the camera sensor. And if it open too slow, too much light will hit the camera sensor. Your aperture and your shutter, they have to work hand in hand for you to get the right image. Now, this shutter speed can also be used for creative image. If someone is dancing and you want to show motion, as I'm moving like this, and you want a motion, want to show my movement in your picture, you use a very slow shutter speed so they can record my movement. But if you want everything to be sharp, you have to freeze the motion by using a very fast shutter speed. Now, look at what we have here. Shutter speed display. If you look at the table on my right hand side, where we have 1/2000, that is a very fast shutter speed. It's going to freeze motion. That is very fast. After you are playing football or doing anything, the image will be so sharp. If you come down to 1/4, if you look at the image that is running there, it's becoming blurry. That means the shutter speed is so slow, and the camera sensor will capture the movement of the image. That is what shutter speed is used for. Now, the next item of the exposure triangle is the ISO. ISO means International Organization for Standardization. This measures how sensitive our camera sensor is to light. If you want our camera sensor to be sensitive to light, you can increase your ISO. If you want it to be less sensitive to light, you can reduce your ISO. The best way to explain this is that if 5 of us were in a room and AC is on, someone will say, this AC is too cold. Another person say, increase the AC, I'm feeling hot. What that is telling us that our body sensitivity to the temperature in the room differs. So the same thing with ISO. Sensitivity of our camera sensor differs. It might be too sensitive to light, or it might not be, it might be less sensitive to light. So we need to adjust our ISO to the appropriate amount. Now, putting these three together is what we call exposure triangle. We have done a theory part, but there's need for us to put it into practice. So that is when we are coming to shoot. If you carry your camera phone to snap, this is what they are programmed inside the camera phone for snapping, and it is what every one of us use when we are doing when we are snapping. So while shooting in manual mode, the dream of every photography is to be able to shoot in the M mode, manual mode. That means you determine everything. You control your aperture, your shutter, and your ISO. Now, how do you shoot in manual mode? Let's just do a practical example. If you have camera before you, I'm talking about DCLSR, the real camera, not your phone camera. Turn your camera, put on your camera, and you will see a knob, a dial on top of the camera. You will turn it to where you are seeing M, which is the manual mode. Look for an object that is about 6 to 7 feet, or any object at all. Just look for it. Now, go to your camera. Look for the aperture control. Set it to 5.6. And to your viewfinder, focus your lens on the object. Then the other thing that you can adjust is your what? Shutter speed. Start turning the dial until the graph in your camera is on the middle. That line is at the middle, it's at 0. Then you take a picture. That's what we do when we are taking a picture in manual mode. Excuse me. Now, let's now explore the exposure triangle very, very well. Like I explained, the three items that we mentioned, the three variables, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, what determines what will snap is the interplay of these three elements or three variables. That is what we adjust, either upward or downward. One will compromise for the other for us to get the right exposure. Now, our camera has different shooting mode. The one I just explained is just a brief of how to do manual. There are various shooting modes on our DCLSR. The advanced mode are the manual mode, aperture priority mode, shutter speed mode, program mode, where other basic modes are auto, portrait, landscape, and night and sport micro mode. So these are the mode. If you look at your camera, that's where we see the MASP, manual, aperture, shutter, and program mode. That is where we see the MASP. or that I will talk about earlier. Mode P means program mode. Yeah, the camera determines if you are using a program mode, the camera is doing the work for you. The camera is what? Just your camera will work like your phone camera. You will just snap and it will determine. We are talking about mode L, which is shutter priority mode. At this point, you are telling the camera that you want to control your shutter speed. That every other thing should be controlled by the camera. That means your aperture and your ISO. But here, you are taking control over your shutter speed. This mode is used when you are doing sport photography or you are snapping children that are very fast. They are playing so fast. The next mode is mode A, which is aperture priority mode. Here, at this point, you tell the camera, determine what my ISO is, determine what my shutter speed is, but let me have control over my aperture. Now, the manual mode. Now, here, you are the one that determines the value of your three variables: your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. You determine that one on your own. The camera, you are taking the control away from the camera. Now, another thing that we need to know when we are shooting using our camera is what we call white balance. This just white balance means how our camera should see color. If this place we are having white light, we want the camera to see this white light as this fluorescent light as what? As tungsten light. I should have a warm tone. You adjust your white balance. If you want to have a cool tone, that means to look bluish, you adjust your what? Your white balance. It's talking about adjusting the temperature of your light. Should it be warm or should it be what? Cool. So it is the camera will give you the power to do that. This color temperature is measured in Kelvin scale. This is how it looks. If you look at the orange side and yellow side, these are the warm part. It's 12 Kelvin. Then to the cool side, that's the blue side. That's what we call the cool part. So, and the camera have some settings. We have your auto, incandescent, fluorescent, direct sunlight, flash, cloudy shade, K, and we are welcome back. We are now at the module 3 of our photography class. Here we are looking at light meter. We all know what meter is used for. It's used to read, to measure. At home, you know PSN, you have light meter in your house. At the end of the month, if you are still using the old meter, NEPA man or PSN will come to your house. They'll come and read your meter and they will use that to bill you. That is telling you the quantity or the amount of electricity you have consumed for that period. Now, if you recall that we have been talking about that we said photography is about all about capturing light. How do you know that the light you are capturing is enough or it is not enough? How do you determine the value at which you should put your aperture, your shutter speed and ISO to get the right quantity of light to capture? That is the work of the light meter, and we are going to look at that now. Just give me a second. I'm back. So look at light meter. Like I explained, light meter is used to measure the amount of light that is available for us to capture onto our camera sensor by adjusting the three variables of the exposure triangle. which are aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Based on the light meter, we can determine if the light we have available is enough or insufficient to give us the appropriate exposure. What do I mean? Would our picture be dark, or will it be too bright, or will it just be correct? So that is what we use light meter for. And in photography, we have two types of light meter. We have one light meter, which is called in-camera light meter. This one is the light meter built inside our camera. And we have handheld light meter. That means an external light meter that has nothing to do with our camera. So let's look at the in-camera light. So we're going to look at the in-camera light meter now. If you have camera before you might not be able to see this on your smartphone. But if you have any other amateur camera up to the professional camera, you can see what I mean by in-camera light meter. This is the camera that is inbuilt into our camera, and that is what our camera used to judge the amount of light that is available for us to capture. It is this one that will tell you if the light you are capturing is the image you want to capture will be too dark or too bright. So, and this camera, if you look at your camera viewfinder, you will see line. It's like a graph, like line graph. That is what it is. So let me go to the now. This is how it looks. If you look at where it is cycle here, that is the graph that you will see. That's how it looks. If you look at the arrow on the left, the arrow is pointing to plus. The light meter on that left is telling us that the light that will come to the camera is too much, so our image will be too bright. If you look at the one on the right, which is at the center, it's telling us that that is the perfect light we need for the image by the evaluation of the camera sensor, which is the correct one. And if you look at the one, the black and white graph, just to depict it here, the first one, that bar is at the middle, say correctly exposed meter. The second one, the bar is to the extreme light left, which is -2. It's telling us that picture will be too dark, that means underexposed image. While the last one is to the right, almost to +2, which is saying that it is too bright. Camera light, we'll continue with that. So, the light meter information is established as follows. I have explained this. There's nothing for us to go there. On this previous slide, if the bar is at the center, the meter is saying the scene is correctly exposed. If the meter skew to the left or to the negative side of the line, it means that the scene is underexposed. So we need to add in more light. If the meter is skewed to the right or to the positive value, that means the scene is overexposed, like I have explained earlier. In camera light meter, even though the camera ISO meter, there are different metering modes that the in-camera meter uses to evaluate the light. So the in-camera light use different metering mode. These are the mode. If you look at the one Nikon, we have matrix mode, center weighted metering, and we have sport mode. So those are the mode. So you have to set this metering mode on your camera for your camera to use. Most of the time, you set your camera metering mode to matrix mode or evaluative metering mode if you're using Canon. Other modes, as you go on, you will know what other modes are for. We are looking at matrix mode or evaluative metering mode. Use the available light in the whole frame. You look at everything available to determine the correct exposure. If you are snapping a landscape, you go to your village on top of the mountain. You want to snap everything under. You can use this metering mode. Center weighted mode. Use the light at the center of the frame. That is center weighted. The center of the frame to determine the correct exposure. So we can use this thing for any kind of photography, except for landscape. But we can also use for landscape photography if you so wish. We have spot metering mode. Here, it is where you focus on that the light that the camera you use to determine the correct exposure. If you are snapping individual, you can use spot metering mode. Or you are trying micro, that means ant, you can use spot metering mode or food photography and everything. We have partial metering mode also. use a portion of like a fascia. Instead of using the normal center weight, just use a portion of the frame to determine that. But if you leave your metering mode at matrix or evaluative, you are good to go. But you can start to use anyone for your creative hand. The next one we'll talk about is handheld. Because the meter in the camera has its own shortcoming, they are come with an handheld camera that it will be independent of the camera. That is to say, you will use that meter independent of the camera to measure the available light instead of relying on what the light of the camera is using. Now, for you to use this light, this meter, you will determine two things, and the camera will tell you the value of the other one. You will determine what your ISO is, and you can determine what your shutter speed is. Then the camera will not give you the value of your aperture. That is how, once you do that, that's how you use your handheld meter. This is how the meter looks, and they are not cheap. The minimum amount you can see for this meter I'm looking at, it goes to like 400,000, 300,000, 400,000. There are cheaper ones, but that is what they use. Although they can last very, very long. That's how to use handheld meter. I have explained this. You turn off the knob, the white dome. That is the white thing you are looking at here. You turn the white dome, and the dome is producing. The dome has to come out like this, because that is what will determine the value of light for you to receive light. Then you set your ISO, your aperture or your shutter speed, like I explained to you, and then put the meter in front of the subject with the white dome pointing to the camera. That means you put the meter in front of what you want to snap, and you press the meter, and the camera will snap. It will tell you the amount of light that is available by telling you what your shutter speed should be or your aperture to be. So type of metering, or type of, we have reflective metering and incident metering. Your inbuilt camera metering method use what we call reflective metering. That means you point your camera at the subject, and the light reflecting from your subject to the camera. That's what the camera used to determine what the amount of light available. And we have the incident metering. This one is telling you it's not the light hitting directly on your light meter. This one is used by the extra light meter. So that is, I have explained what this one. Reflective metering is subjective. That means if you are wearing white will reflect more light. If you are wearing anything darker color, cool color, it will not reflect as much light as a brighter color, which might affect your metering. That is what we are talking about. So to overcome that subjectivity, that's why we come with incident metering. Partial representation of type of light. That's it. Reflective light. The sun is hitting the subject, and the sun is reflecting light to the camera. That's what we call reflective metering. While instead lighting, the sun is hitting the light from the sun is hitting the handheld meter directly. 18 gray card or middle gray card. Everything in our camera, this is how our camera will operate. If you want to snap and you point your camera at your subject, inside the camera is programmed to turn everything to gray. That is the starting point of the camera. When you turn everything to gray, then from there it is now used to measure the gray. What am I saying now? If your subject is wearing white, that means for you to turn white to gray, it has to take out enough light. You have to reduce the light there so that it can become gray. They determine from there. But if your subject is wearing darker color, it just need to take away little gray or add little light for it to gray. That is what we call 18 gray. It's a gray color card used uniformly. It is used to correct light and also used to deter. We have what we call palm metering. Palm metering. This is taking an exposure metering of our palm in the absence of gray card. And these are also part of reflective metering. This is done by calculating exposure difference between your hand exposure and gray card. I'm just go through this slide if you have it and read it. But at this level, you might not need to do this thing. Even out your photography life, you might not need to use this method. We have Sunny 16 rule. These are the old method used to determine our exposure. well during the film day. But now, because of the advantage of digital camera, we don't have to. But let's go through stuff. This is a way of metering for exposure during daylight without use of a light meter. The basics on this thing is that set your aperture to f16, your shutter speed to the reciprocal of your ISO. What does that mean? That if your ISO is 100, let your aperture be what? If your ISO is 100, let your shutter speed be 1/100. If it's 200, let it be other. That is what Sony 16 rule is all about. And this is the end of the class. For you to appreciate what we have said so far, I will employ all of you, because this is a virtual class, that you should go online, either on YouTube, and type in exposure triangle, so that I can see videos, live videos, how everything we have explained, how they are being demonstrated for a better understanding. Thank you for your time. My name still remains Aziz Eniton Ojewale. Thank you. We are welcome back one more time. I hope you enjoy yourself throughout the class. Photography is wider than what we have discussed, but this is just an introduction. I will advise you that on your own, go through the internet, and if you have the means and capability, you can go for additional class. Photography is not just about the scale, it's all about creativity. So I will say thank you for your time. I hope you tell your friends and loved ones to follow us on our social media handle. At Twitter and Instagram is at Codvi PLC. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day.